Hey guys, today I'm going to be sharing my birth story with you over my second son. My toddler is currently in his bedroom. Baby's trying to take a nap, so if you hear him crying, he's trying to nap. And I think hopefully he's going to sleep because he's quiet right now. So this is my chance to finally film a video without my kiddos around, but of course I'm talking about them. So it's been 5 months since my son has been born, and I really meant to make this video a lot sooner so I could have more fresh and accurate details, but I'm just going to tell this story from what I remember. So I was pregnant with my second baby, and he was due on March 29th, 2020. And this was the month that the pandemic really hit. It kind of had been around, talked about, but it was the beginning of March where people kind of started getting a little concerned. And then right when I was about to have him is when all of this went down. And I don't know why I want to cry, because I felt like it didn't affect me. I think I'm just good at hiding my emotions from myself. I've said this before, because I want to cry right now, but I felt like it didn't affect me. But it must have in some way. But this was right when the pandemic hit, and I was having prodromal labor for weeks and weeks, and with my first son I was induced, so I didn't really know what to expect. But we sent off my first son, my older son Micah, to his grandmother's, and I was really curious about trying this midwife's brew. It's pretty controversial, and in the spirits of being more private on my YouTube, I'm not going to explain why I decided to go ahead with it, or my reasoning behind it, but I ended up trying the midwife's brew. Earlier that night, my back was really hurting. I think I was actually already in early labor, and I didn't know it because it was super similar to prodromal labor. And with my first son, since I was induced, I was already at the hospital, you know? So I didn't know that it started like that, like contractions, Braxton-like, and then grew in intensity. I thought that you would just start being like, ow. And so I kind of ignored them. So I think I was possibly already in labor. If he wasn't coming right then, he was going to be coming probably within a few days, or maybe even longer, but he was preparing to come. And at my last appointment, I was 3 centimeters dilated. I kind of wanted to wait to my next appointment to see how far along I was, and I think my appointment was on a Tuesday. But since my son, what, Baba? Gotta go take a pee-pee break, be back. So I'm not sure where I'm at, and the camera settings may have changed a little bit because I had to go help Micah with a pee-pee break, but I am back and ready to finish the story. So, whoa, I'm very bright. I think I was at where my son was at his grandma's, and I thought I was in labor, but I wasn't really sure. But since my son was already at his grandma's, I didn't have to worry about my husband being at work or finding someone to watch him or taking him all over the place or waiting for someone to come. I just didn't have to worry about that because he was already over there. So I'm like, you know what, let's try this drink. So we go and have dinner with my mother-in-law and my in-laws. And then after that, Gio and I went to Walmart and got the supplies. I went home and I did the drink. Gio was just doing his own thing, and I was 39 weeks, and so 39 weeks. I had him 39 weeks one day. I watched videos for so long before because I was so nervous about a bunch of different things, and I'm not telling you to do the midwife's drink. This is just my story. And I also don't need oh, you shouldn't have done that because my baby's here, it's done with. And like I said, I did it. I'm not explaining why. I chose to do it. And so I decided to do this drink, and I have a whole video on that. I will leave it down below. And I wasn't really sure if it was going to work or not. I was really nervous that it was going to be disgusting, and Gio was off wherever he was. I don't know. Upstairs, I don't really know, but I drank the drink, and then I started cleaning, and about 2 hours probably after that, I was very tired, and I was contracting, I believe. I don't really remember because I wasn't really paying attention to it, because like I said, I didn't know I was really contracting. I thought it was prodromal labor, Braxton Hicks. They were noticeable, but they weren't oh, ow. I would have these for hours some days, and then they just stop. So I'm just oh, whatever. And so I go, getting all comfy here. I go to sleep and around 11 p.m. and it's crazy that this happened because I took it like what, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. I think I read on Google that it's about 4 hours to 6 hours things in your stomach start to digest, and that's really when things started to pick up. I started having contractions that were pretty strong, but nothing really to alert me yet. And I just kept kind of going back to sleep. But finally I was like, these kind of hurt. Like, I'm gonna get up because I don't want to lay down and I don't want to like sit in the dark and just like struggle through them either. So I checked the time and it was about 1. I don't have exact time frames, but it was about 1. And I was having contractions, so I decided I'm going to go straighten my hair because they were kind of intense but nothing horrible. So as I'm straightening my hair, which really only takes me like 10 minutes, they grew stronger and stronger, where I started having to pause during the contraction, but I could still talk and all of that stuff. So I'm like, I don't know, you know, I still wasn't convinced this was the real deal. And I know that these things can go on for hours and hours. So I'm like, I don't want to wake up Gio because he needs to go to work in the morning and he wakes up at 5 a.m. So I'm going to feel really awful if we go to the hospital and spend all night there and then he has to go to work and he's going to be exhausted, because at the beginning of my pregnancy, I went to the hospital over my antidepressant. I was on an antidepressant and I was just feeling very horrible, and I was really scared that it was the medication or something. And we stayed like almost all night, and then Gio had to go to work and he was super tired, and his boss was like, you look like you're drunk, because he was just so tired. And so I was like, I'm going to wait until as close as I possibly can to the time that he needs to wake up to go to work. So if it's like a false alarm, cool, he can go to work and I can tell him like, no need to worry. And if it's not a false alarm, we can go. But within an hour, like 2-ish or so, I'm like, ouch, like these really hurt. And I decided to give a call to the on-call nurse of my OBGYN practice, and she told me yes to go in. At this point, I think my contractions were like 45 seconds to 1 minute, and they were about like 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes apart. And I know the rule like 511, or I think it's 411, but basically I think it's when your contractions are 5 minutes apart, lasting for 1 minute for 1 hour. But mine were super close and super short, so I wasn't really sure. Like I said, my first one was induced, so I was never timing them. And I wasn't really sure, like, do they like start off short and get longer? Like, I don't know. Now it makes sense that I was probably in labor, and then this like really jump started it, this midwife's brew. And then I was like in active labor, the end of labor. And I just don't know why that didn't click in my brain. I'm like, these are like really close. Like, I don't really know what's going on. And they're like, yes, you should go. So I go and I wake up Gio, and he like hops out of bed, and we already had our bags pretty much ready. We just had to grab last minute things like our phone chargers and some clothes for Gio, things like that. And we only live like 8-10 minutes away from the hospital. So I put on an adult diaper because I was feeling a lot of pressure in my pelvis, and I thought that my water was gonna break, but I wasn't sure. So I put on the adult diaper so it wouldn't pop all over my car, just in case. And we start walking to the car, and we had to park like in the back of our complex because we got home later and all the parking was taken. So I'm trying to walk to the car, but they just are growing in intensity super fast. And I made it about halfway, and I had to take a break because I couldn't talk through them anymore. I couldn't walk through them anymore. So I'm just trying to work through them. I would kind of just like sway my hips back and forth and breathe through them. And Gio just kept walking and got the car. And I'm like, no, like I can walk, I can make it, like wait. But he went and got the car anyways, and he pulled up and I hopped inside. And oh my gosh, these contractions sitting down were horrible. I much preferred to labor standing up. It just felt very natural and good for me. And so we get to the hospital, and at 2:40 a.m. Gio texts his mom, hey mom, like we're at the hospital, I think she's having the baby. Now with the whole COVID thing, he couldn't go with me, and I think after 8 p.m. if you go into labor, you have to go through the ER. You can't go through like the women's area, the women's center. So he had to go around to the women's center, but I had to go through the ER. I don't really get it, but They basically asked me all the questions, took my temp, and I went in and there was no one in the ER, like nobody. Which every time I've been to that ER, it's been like packed. And so they put me in a wheelchair. They're asking me all these questions, trying to find me in the system. And I'm like really hurting at this point. So I'm like moaning and making all these noises. And behind me is this young police officer. And he's looking at me like, oh my God. So they like wheel me out into a hallway, and then there's another male nurse behind me, and he's taking me to the triage, I guess. I thought they would just take me straight to labor and delivery, but no, they have to like make sure you're in labor first to send you to labor and delivery. So they took me there, and we're in this elevator together alone, and I'm like sound like a porn star in there, like with this. It was embarrassing, but you know, they're nurses, they know this stuff. And they get me there, and immediately as I walk through the doors, the nurses like go to that room. So I go into that room, and she brings me a gown and says change it to this gown. So I managed to get my clothes off, but then I couldn't put the gown on. It was very painful, and I guess she came in thinking I was already dressed, but I was like butt naked, like on the bed, like moaning and rocking my hips. And you don't care at this moment, like it's true that you just stop caring. And so she's trying to ask me all these questions too to find me in the system, and I have like several last names, and sometimes I don't remember which one I give. It can get very confusing, and they weren't like finding me or whatever, and I couldn't talk through them at this point. So she helps me get the gown on and asks me to lay on the bed, and it hurts so bad, probably because you have a baby's head coming through your pelvis and you're like squishing it, and standing up is just very like, the baby's just gonna like flow through your hips, you know. And it was hurting so bad, and she's like, I'm going to check you. And Gio was finally made it. He made it just in time, and I wasn't really paying attention. I was out of it, but he said she didn't even check me yet. She was like going to check me, and before she checked me, my water broke. And she yells out the door, her water broke, and she's what is it, she's complete is what they said. And I'm like, what's complete? She goes, you're 10 centimeters. And I'm like, huh? What do you mean? I'm 10 centimeters. And then they like get the bed and they start running me to the labor and delivery. And I'm like, does this mean no epidural? She goes, And at this point, guys, I'm pushing my baby out as they're running me to the Not yet, Bobby. It's a little bit longer. They are pushing me, but I'm pushing the baby out. I know that I am. I'm getting intense pressure, and it does feel like you need to poo. So I'm like holding onto the side of the bed, like pushing, and they're telling me like, no, no. And I'm like, yes, yes. And we finally get there, and the nurse that I had was amazing. I think she was the charge nurse. I really loved all of them. I wish I remembered all of their names. I could like send them a gift and say thank you. And she just gets on the bed and she looks at me and she goes, when you're ready. Like really like letting me like take charge and feel like they're there for me and they're not pushing me to do anything. But I still had to lay on the bed. So finally I made it over to the bed, and they're trying to get me prepped. And I thought they laid a blanket on me, but I don't think they did. I think it was the gown that I was wearing. And I'm like, why aren't they noticing that this baby is coming out? So finally I tell them like, I think this baby is coming out, and they're still just trying to get everything ready. I think they're telling me not to push, and they're asking the baby's name, and Gio's like, Jude. And I'm like, no, his name is not Jude. And they go back to like dying, and they thought that was like really funny. And then I'm like, no, like the baby's coming, like the baby is coming out. And so they go to look, and then there was several nurses, at least two, and one says to the charge nurse, is this going to be a nurse delivery? And she's like, yes, this is about to be a nurse delivery. And I think it's fun for them. I think it's exciting. Like they get to be the doctor, you know, and they really know so much. It's insane. The nurses do way more for me both times than the doctor ever did. And so they tell me, okay, like you can push. And I literally pushed maybe three times. I don't remember exactly, but I barely pushed. So maybe, let's say that each time I push was like the 3 sets of 10 pushing, where you're like 1, 2, but I didn't really have that this time. Last time it was very guided pushing, but since I had no epidural, I was unmedicated. I could feel my body a lot better, and I could feel like when to push, and I could feel the pain. So I'm like, okay, when I push this baby out, the pain will stop. So I pushed him out super fast, and I'm just gonna say 30 seconds times 3, so maybe like a minute and a half. And I did it unmedicated. I had no intention. I've always thought that maybe I will, but if I don't, then it's fine. But I didn't have any intention of like going in there like, I'm going to do this unmedicated. But really, it wasn't bad at all. Maybe if my labor was a lot longer and painful, like I was stuck in a certain phase of labor with very painful contractions for hours and hours. With the Maaa, I made it to a 7, and I thought I was about to have him unmedicated too. But it really wasn't that bad. I think that they both hurt the same amount, just in different ways. The part that hurts the most, I think, is the contractions and postpartum. And not all the contractions hurt, just like the really like strong ones when you're like the baby's coming were painful. And I get back labor, which is painful. So my baby comes out and he's born at 3:10. I got there at 2:40 and he's born at 3:10. And a.m. in the morning, he was 8 pounds 2 ounces, and I forgot how long, like 20 or 21 inches long. And guys, my doctor would have let me go to 41 weeks, like almost 42 weeks. He would have been huge. He would have been 39, 40, 41. He would have been 9.5 pounds if I went to 41 plus weeks. Like, no, I'm glad he got out of me. Like, his pregnancy was miserable for me, and I thought that like, oh, it's the last few weeks, it doesn't matter. But once he was like 3 weeks old, and I was like, I could still be pregnant right now, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, no way, like, no, I'm glad you're out. So he's born, and I did tear, and it did not hurt. I did not feel that I tore while I was pushing. Then the doctor comes like 30 minutes later, and he's just like, sorry, I missed it, and he stitches me up, and they give like local anesthetic, and it pinched a little bit, but nothing too bad, and things were good for a little while. I'm holding my baby. I'm like, I can't believe I just did that. And then things took a turn, and I started to hemorrhage, and I started feeling very sick. I started puking. I puked all over my baby, like all over him. Gio has the bag, and he's trying to like put it on my face so I don't puke on the baby, but all he's doing is suffocating me, and I'm like inhaling my vomit. And then the nurses come and take him. They give me nausea meds, and I continue to vomit. And they start to tell me that I'm bleeding. And for whatever reason, it took them forever to get the Pitocin to help my uterus contract. But they need to get the Pitocin, and they were saying that I was having clots the size of 2 fists, like huge clots coming out of me. And Gio looked freaked out, and he said that he was very afraid. And I was really out of it. He kept telling me not to sleep because I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna take a nap. And I was afraid, but I feel like my coping mechanism in the moment is to kind of like be like shut down a little bit and be very level-headed. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, okay. And like, I don't show too much emotion. But it did start to get to me when they told me that, you know, people die because of this. You could have a hysterectomy. We might have to put a balloon inside of you. And I'm just like, here I am. I'm either going to die, or the decision for me to not be able to have any more children is about to be made for me right now. And yeah, I thought I was gonna die for a little bit. They're giving me shots in my, I think it's vitamin K shots in my thighs, which burnt very bad. Like, shots don't hurt me, but that shot hurt. And I think that's the one they give the babies too, and I feel bad for the baby. They were giving me Pitocin. They were like rubbing on my uterus, you know how they do after birth, but like 10 times more because I was bleeding so much. It was awful. My belly would start to get hurt really bad and get very mushy, and they were trying to show me how to make sure that my uterus was okay, and they showed me how to fill for my uterus, and that we want it small and we want it hard and we don't want it mushy and big. And they literally did that for hours and hours. I was in labor and delivery, and I lost 1,500 milliliters of blood, which like they consider a hemorrhage for vaginal delivery 500 milliliters, and I did 1,500, which is classified as severe. postpartum hemorrhage, and it was kind of scary, but the nurses really held it down and they really helped me out, and they stayed with me the whole entire time. They didn't leave me in the room at all alone. And I got a blood transfusion then. And then I finally was stable enough to go to labor and postpartum. And then postpartum, I was very weak. I actually almost passed out on the toilet before I went to postpartum. They had me use the toilet and I'm like, I'm going down. And it was just a very strange feeling. Like, I never felt that way in my life. I started to feel like really like hot in my face, and things started to sound muffled, but also like they were talking through a megaphone at the same time with like a sock in their mouth. Like, it was really weird. Like, it was hard to understand them, but it was very loud, and they were telling me like, do you understand, can you hear me? And I couldn't even do anything. I'm just like I can, yes, but like I can't do anything. And it was just very scary. I'm like, I've never experienced that. And once I made it to postpartum, the nurses took care of me again very well, and I needed help getting to the toilet and things, and I ended up getting another blood transfusion there as well. And the doctor told me that my hemorrhage was, they don't really know why, but that it could have been a combination of a fast labor. Yes, Micah? Yes? Okay, give me a minute, please. Fast labor and a large baby. And my first son, I had difficulties because they said that he was large for me, and then this time I had difficulties because they said my baby is large. So they said if I ever have another baby, I need to like be super strict with no sugar. They told me no soda, no dessert or anything. And that's my labor and delivery story. I feel like I definitely could have elaborated even more on it, but that's the gist of it. And it was so much fun and fast and crazy and like empowering, but it was also terrifying. And I definitely do have some birth trauma. They told me that I was more likely to suffer from postpartum depression, especially since I had depression in the beginning of my pregnancy, and then I had this postpartum hemorrhage, which can be traumatic. Luckily I've been okay though. I have not experienced any postpartum anxiety, or maybe a little anxiety, but nothing really. It's a complete different experience this time with my mental health versus my first one. And that's where we are. I'm now 5 months postpartum, and I'm still on iron supplements since I lost so much blood, and I'm finally getting to the point where I'm not bruising as easily and I'm not as lightheaded. I was very lightheaded for a while after. I'd have to sit down, or I remember one night I got up to go use the restroom after the baby was born, and I'm literally swaying like this because I was just like, I just had lost so much blood and I'm so dizzy. But I'm doing better now, and it was super crazy, and I can't believe I did it unmedicated. It's super cool for me to think that I did that, and it's like really empowering for me. There goes my baby. To do it again in the future. But I'm going to go now. Follow me on my Instagram at AlexisNDiaz_. Subscribe to see more videos. And yeah, my husband's about to be home. My toddler's asking to come out, and my baby just woke up. So perfect timing. Catch you next time. Bye.